Hello everyone and welcome back to our YouTube channel, Sharang and Sharvari. So first of all, thank you so much for all the love, for all the comments you guys have been leaving behind. And this was always our passion, guys. So literally, even if no one was watching us, we would do it because for some strange reasons, Sharvari and I happen to have the same hobby. Um, so lately there have been some developments in our life. I've been busy in a corporate job. Sharvari is taking a break, sabbatical, call it what you want, due to some reasons which those who know.
So everyone on the channel knows, but we both have decided that we want to keep that part of our life private.
Yes.
So, but if you have been following our posts and social media updates, then you
Yes.
will know what we're talking about.
So point is, there's a good reason for both of us to be super health conscious. And the thing is, like Sharvari recently has been doing a course on metabolic health coaching, and because of this, it has been truly an eye-opening perspective. So whenever I go hang out with her family, for example, they often talk about the diet that they're following. It's called the LCHF, low carb, high fat. And this brought me to a topic which is related but somewhat tangential to it, which is sugar, a modern day poison. So this whole story starts one day because Sharvari and I were walking along the road, for our evening walk, and I decided to buy a cup of lassi. Lassi, for those, if there are any Firangs watching us, then it's a glass of sweetened, not exactly milk, sweetened buttermilk, you can call it. That's the closest equivalent.
Do you know an interesting fact?
Yes.
Every pirang, as I say,
Yes.
as we say,
Yes.
they have this staple order of always ordering mango
Yes.
lassi for
Yes.
some reason. That's like a stereotype,
So
but
whatever. So I was having lassi, and I was like, this tastes really sweet, right? So I just read the manufacturer's label, and to my horror, it contained 20 grams or like 20 grams of sugar per 100 gram of product, and that's insane, right? That's like, so for every 1 cup of lassi I was drinking, 1/5 of it was just pure unadulterated sugar. And that got me to thinking that what am I doing, and basically, so America, unfortunately, has a bad reputation as being a land of the fat people or land of obese people. It is the unfortunately the fattest country in the world. And I remember my friend Alec Fufidio, shout out to him if he's listening, mentioning that Americans are fat in a way that Indians cannot believe,
Yeah.
and we read up about it, and it turns out the average American consumes 22 cubes of sugar in one day,
Oh
all
my
included,
God.
which is insane. And that I really think it is one of the reasons why there is obesity is on such a massive scale today. So, guys, do you know that today actually obesity is a bigger problem than world hunger? So, the number of people who don't get access to adequate nutrition or who are starving to death is much, much lower than the number of people who are suffering from obesity.
Actually, there is a cluster of diseases, and the phrase that we use frequently, it's
Yeah.
cardiodiabesity.
Right.
So it's a mix of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and obesity. So these are like the three major diseases that are literally like it's like a pandemic if you
Right.
think about
It actually is. And I
Yeah.
think it is, like, honestly, in our own lifetimes, we have seen India transform. So India has become a much more urbanized society. People are increasingly adopting a Western way of living. And what we see is that we are getting a Western waistline. You know what I mean? Like, the number of obese people is truly shocking and is heartbreaking. So, like, I really think that it's high time that Indians got serious about their health and their well-being. Now, before, like, I think Sharvari, you can take it from here, since you have done the course.
Sure.
Probably much more than I do. Then I'll give my own take, since I'm a biologist.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, when we think about sugar, so automatically, like, I have a conversation with people regarding this that, like, we, have started taking sugarless tea or we have started taking sugarless coffee, which is good, but it really does not solve the problem.
No.
Because unknowingly, your intake of sugar is a lot and you don't literally know about it.
Yeah.
It's too much. And this can be in the form of, like, if you live in India, there is a function, you go there, you have this entire sweets platter, you eat it, and you're like, yeah, if I'm cutting down on the sugar in my tea, what harm can this do? Actually, the sugar in your tea is way better
Yeah.
than what you're going to be consuming. So that is one fact. The second is that what people fail to recognize is types of sugars.
Hmm.
So there are two types of sugars that I like to speak in a lot of layman language. The first is that you have natural sugars. So fruits that naturally have sugar in them, or other substances that you see that they have natural sugar in them. But there are also other things, such as you have these candies and chocolates, and they all have refined or processed sugar. So our problem to that extent is not natural sugars, it is actually the processed sugars.
Yeah.
And I don't want to defame any brand or name, but we all know what we eat. So
Unless they're willing to sponsor us, in which case that brand is the best.
yeah, like you can sponsor us. We are not going to eat it though, but you can sponsor us. We would appreciate the help. But yeah, so we know that we have these junk food, and all of these things are going on. So the difference here that we have to realize, Sharang, is that we need to consume foods in their natural form. So cutting down on your sugar is not the option. Replacing it with a healthier option is the main direction to go by.
Right. So, like that's a wonderful perspective, but I'll go into the nitty-gritties of science, right?
Yeah.
So, what exactly is sugar and why do we like it so much? So, whenever you ingest any kind of food material, right, the digestive mechanisms of the body begin to break it down using enzymatic processes, using just the food, like the teeth themselves. They gnash the food. They they mix it into these small constituent elements. Ultimately, all the food that we eat is broken down and converted into glucose. This glucose is then metabolized by the body. Essentially, it's burnt over a sequential series of chemical steps, right? So, what happens when you burn carbon? You get carbon dioxide, right? You get carbon dioxide and water, especially when you burn any hydrocarbon, especially if you burn it in a very pure way. So, let's say methane is CH4, you burn it, you get carbon dioxide and water.
Yeah.
So a very, very similar process takes place in the body, which is why whenever we exhale carbon dioxide and water.
Correct.
So the carbon dioxide we exhale is produced by literal breakdown of glucose in a sequential series of steps known as the metabolic pathway in the body.
Correct.
Right. So now, even in terms of there's fructose and sucrose. I think everyone must have heard these terms. Ultimately, even fructose is converted to glucose by some enzymes. Like, I will not get into the the exact science of it, how it is done, but suffice to say, for this, it is done this way. Now, why do we find sugar so addictive? Why do we find sugar so tasty? Because when we were in the wild, right, like if we're just getting glucose directly in its raw form, then the energy hits us like this, right?
Exactly.
So let's say I eat a piece of bread, right? It takes a lot of time for my saliva to activate, then my digestive enzymes to activate, finally my intestine to absorb the food, convert it to energy, so on and so forth. On the other hand, let's say I eat a teaspoon of sugar, right? That hits my tongue, it's absorbed, the absorption begins in the tongue itself, and the signal goes straight to the brain, which is why when like in America, when kids eat a lot of candies, they get quite hyperactive, because all of that energy is delivered to the body in a punch, right? And actually, I'll cite the source later. There are multiple studies that why is alcohol, for example, addictive, right? That's because whenever you consume alcohol, your brain gets activated and there's a dopamine release, right? And a very, very similar process also takes place when you eat something sugar, when something containing sweet. Why? Because from the perspective of evolutionary biology, such sources, it's an indicator to the brain that this is a very nutrient dense substance. And since we evolved in a climate where we were continuously starving to death, it makes all the sense in the world to find substances which are high in fat and high in sugars addictive.
Also, one more thing that we don't realize is our beverages. So
Yeah.
I need to say this because it is the truth. I have a million papers which will say this, but the Diet Coke, Coke Zero,
Pepsi,
Pepsi,
Sprite,
drink.
any brand.
It is so bad. Like, I can't, like, you guys have heard of that story, like, it can clean a toilet or things like that.
Yeah.
But I'm not kidding, it actually can. Plus, the amount of sugar. So having like three gulps of Coca-Cola is literally like having 15 spoons of sugar in one.
So how much sugar is present in 100 milliliter of Coke?
I will have to search for it,
Okay.
but it's a lot.
Okay,
It
we'll
is a
put it in
lot.
the
Like,
comments.
I don't want to put out wrong information
Yeah,
here,
no,
but
we'll.
it is to, I think, our common knowledge that the amount of sugar in that is too much. That's
Yeah.
why you feel you have that energy rush
Yeah.
when you have Coca-Cola.
Yeah. So, and as Sharvari was mentioning, why are natural sugars not problematic? That is because the way sugar is made, right? It undergoes a lot of chemical processes to concentrate the sugar, to
Yeah.
concentrate the sweet element, essentially, right? And that does not happen naturally. So you eat an apple or you eat a mango or whatever, like of course it will be sweet, but it will only be sweet to a certain limit.
Mhm.
Because beyond a point, if excessive sugar accumulates within the living cell, then it will be harmful to the cell itself.
Correct.
For reasons of osmolarity, again, not going into too much science.
Yeah.
So this is the reason, and that is, so long story short, sugar is really, really, really bad for you. And something fundamentally went wrong with the American diet, and indeed the Western diet, and now diet all over the world, where people are just getting morbidly obese. And obesity has a lot of downstream consequences. It's bad for your heart, it's bad for your reproductive system, it's bad for, it's just bad. Like, you'll die sooner. The more obese you are,
Yeah.
the sooner you will die, unfortunately. And I think like some people may say that, oh, we'll just use artificial sweeteners. Believe it or not, those are worse. Because I think maybe Sharvari knows this or knows it better than I do. Some of them have been found to be carcinogenic and they're bad, right?
Exactly.
So just because, oh, it doesn't have sugar and it will be fine, trust me, they'll be worse. Additionally, it will also be problematic for your liver because excess sugar will then be stored as fat in your liver, and that will lead to something known as non-alcoholic.
Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Yes.
It's called NAFLD.
Yes, and like 70% of tech workers in India had fatty liver. It's a horrible disease to have. So, long story short,
Yeah.
as much as possible, what can you do, right? You're an Indian or you're wherever you are, stop eating sugar. And I know it's easier said than done, because today itself I must have had sugar in my tea, sugar in my coffee, etc., etc. But other than that, as much as possible, try to not put sugar. So whenever we cook at home, we try not to add extra sugar. I've tried to take the steps as much as I can. And yeah, Sharvari, our metabolic health coach, take it ahead.
Actually, like what you said is completely right, Sharang. However, I would correct the statement slightly.
Okay.
Stopping sugar is not the solution.
Okay.
Replacing sugar is the solution.
Okay.
So make smarter sugar choices.
Okay. So can you give a working example? Let's
Definitely.
say I'll tell you my diet, right? And you
Yeah.
can tell me how I can replace it.
Sure.
So I wake up in the morning. First thing I do is have a cup of tea, maybe 1 or 2 teaspoons of sugar.
Okay.
Okay. What do I do then?
That's fine. See,
That's
when we look at the whole day,
Huh.
we need to see whether we are including processed sugar anywhere in this.
Yes.
And if yes, then are we, keeping it to a minimum?
Right.
Or if we are having suppose the other day I actually baked a cake. So maybe instead of using processed refined sugar, I could have made it from jaggery.
Right.
And it is much easier for the body to digest and tolerate jaggery because we have been having it for the longest period of time, because it's literally a plant. It's a natural sugar. It's not processed or refined. So of course,
No, it is refined to some extent. When you make jaggery from sugar.
Yes, but if you get it from a good source, then it is as close as
Yes.
pure, not gone through lots of procedures and factory made.
Relatively less
Relatively
processing
less.
steps. Yes.
And I think from like the areas in which people live in India, it's quite easy for them to access jaggery probably. Because inside the country, it's quite easier to get it, like due to transport and everything.
Okay, so that's it for my tea.
Exactly.
After that, I went to the office. Didn't have anything in the middle because I only have I have lunch and I have dinner. So I had methi paratha with a dollop of butter, which I loved.
Okay.
What can I do there? Or is that fine?
So, like a diet, the thing about it is that here I'm going to speak a bit about carbs and the concept of glycemic index.
Okay.
So, for those of you guys who don't know what a GI means, we might have heard this term being thrown around. Yeah, this food causes a GI spike, this food does not. So, what is a GI spike? A GI spike is when is the capacity of a food to rise the blood sugar. That is, in very, very simple terms, what is the GI of food, of a particular food. So fruits, some fruits have a low GI, like apples, some fruits have a very high GI, like bananas. So,
Hmm.
like when you literally have a banana, it is
Hmm.
your blood sugar rapidly rises. If you have a chocolate, the GI is out of this world, right? And many unexpected foods have GIs that are actually low. For example, I got to know recently, it's unhealthy, I'm not advocating it, but Maggie has a comparatively low GI than
Hmm.
what we think. Of
Hmm.
course, I'm not encouraging guys to eat it all the time.
Yes.
It is unhealthy, it's made of maida, that is
Hmm.
all-purpose flour.
Yes.
But we need to look at the glucose index, a glycemic index of a food when you're planning your diet.
Okay.
And if you are actually thinking about cutting carbs, I'll tell you that's not the solution.
Hmm.
You have to let
Not cutting sugar, not cutting carbs.
yeah, but like
Okay.
the point is about carbs.
Okay.
Right. So when people like this is kind of going into the realm of diet planning.
Okay.
So sugar is one thing I'll speak about, but if you're planning your diet, I will request you not to cut carbs.
Hmm.
Because carbs are essential to us. We need that energy, but what has happened is all these people have advertised that carbs are the only thing we need, which is wrong. You need to have a healthy diet full of fats, healthy fats, then proteins, and your carbs and your fiber. So you should have a balanced plate when you're thinking of all these things.
And the food pyramid, which was, which had carbs as the most, and then everything else is actually a lie.
Exactly.
It was deliberately done so.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's a big story, and it will be like, we'll go insanely off topic. But what can you actually do as consumers and as just normal people trying to live their lives? Like most ordinary foods, right, that you get from nature, don't even think about all of these things,
Yeah.
right? You're eating any kind of natural fruit, you're eating any kind of vegetables. This is not something you have to think about.
Unless you are going through some condition in
Yes.
which you're requested not to consume these foods.
Right.
For example, somebody having an issue with their kidney, I would never recommend them to be on a very high protein diet because it's difficult for them to sustain it.
Yes, great point.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, you're just a normal person with no undiagnosed health conditions. You don't need to care about, oh, how much sugar is in a banana or how much sugar is in an apple.
Exactly.
However, the moment you go to the store, the moment you want to buy something, always, and anything which comes in a packet and it has a bunch of instructions, and it will just read the package and it will tell you, oh, how much carbohydrates there are, how much proteins there are, how much fibers there are, and how much of processed added sugar is there. And the moment I began to read those labels, my life changed. I was shocked, I was horrified, I was disgusted. And like, I don't know if this will happen for you, I'm sure it will happen for you. The moment I read that whatever I'm eating is like 1/5 just pure sugar, it made me kind of nauseous. So I think this is a good place to end from my end, Sharwari, unless you want to add something.
No, definitely. I think this is a great place to end this video because we have been, told like we hear these things, but we're not sure why we are doing something.
Right.
So this video was maybe an attempt from, especially since now that I've learned it. And Charang, of course, has a science background, so he's aware of actually the biological, chemical, metabolical processes that are involved in these things. So yeah, I guess that's it from my side.
Yes, and I think I just want to end it on one note that I'm very proud of Sharwari for having completed a course recently on metabolic health coaching, and she's thinking of launching her own business with regards to the same thing. And I think this is a great effort because in the modern world, I think the one thing that people need is to have like a very proper diet so that their weight and their health and long-term health outcomes can be positive. And Sharwari actually has prior experience. She worked for a diabetes management company, so she has 2 years of real-world experience where that's what she would do every day. She would counsel patients. Of course, she would counsel them with regards to their HbA1c levels and their diabetes management specifically. But now, armed with this new knowledge of metabolic health coaching, I think this will be a great endeavor for her, and I hope and pray that she'll be able to leave the world a better place than she found it, which is all that we can hope for.
Thank you so much, Sharang. And it's, I must say that this would have not been possible by his support. He was the person who motivated and pushed me to do this course when I was maybe doubting myself a bit. So I'm really grateful for the support he gave to me while I was doing this course.
Yes. I mean, what I did more was she just wanted to pursue her career further as a psychologist, and I told her that the market won't obey you. You need to obey the market,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you need to look at the demand, and then you need to find your way around the market, because that's the free market is the best thing that ever came out of capitalism. It has allowed unparalleled wealth generation, and so this was my advice to her. And yeah, like it's great, and we pray to God that this works out. And I think, as always, guys, like, share, and subscribe. Bye bye.
Thank you guys. Bye.